It's finally Friday. It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
All right, welcome back to the Friday Show. I'm Scott Jagow, along with Ray Paulick. Thanks for joining us. We've gotten through all of the Kentucky Derby prep races now. We know basically who's going to be in the field, so it's time for a special edition of the Friday Show. It's the Kentucky Derby Match Game. We'll see if your answers match ours to a series of questions. So I'm going to start with question number 1. Of the final prep races that have the most influence on the Derby, which one do you think was the best?
I would have to go with Florida, the Florida Derby. I've been high on Always Dreaming. He was an impressive winner. I thought he had everything his way that day. Track favored him. And Gunnevera, the third place finisher, to me, is the best horse in the Kentucky Derby. And to me, that's a really strong prep race. I think Always Dreaming is going to be tough in the Derby, but I think Gunnevera is going to win the Derby. That makes the Florida Derby, once again, the strongest prep race.
It usually is one of the strongest, and I can't argue too much with that. My answer will be the Sunland Derby. Not usually a big influence on the Kentucky Derby, but this year I think it will be. Already we've seen that it's a pretty strong race. Conquest Mo Money, I did pick him last week, 17-1. Almost pulled it out. That was a tough one. But he ran strong again. IRAP was 4th in the Sunland Derby, shipped and won the Bluegrass Stakes. And hence the winner is resting up for what I think will be a very competitive Derby run. With all due respect to the Arkansas Derby, I think that's the other prep. I think the winner is coming out of one of those three, Arkansas, Florida, or the Sunland Derby. My answer is Sunland for now. All right.
Question number 2. If that's the best prep, what was the worst prep race of the big ones?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but the Santa Anita Derby. I mean, I know the last 3 winners of the Kentucky Derby came out of California, so that's been the strongest state for Kentucky Derbies in the last few years. But that race was really slow, and nobody stands out to me from California this year. So if I have to look at, I've already said Arkansas, Florida, Sunland was strong. The Bluegrass had McCracken. Irish Warcry was in the wood. So that's what I'm left with, is by default almost.
All right, well, if the past is prologue for me, it's the Louisiana Derby. Every year we get excited about the horses that go through that series of races at the fairgrounds. And every year they come up to the Kentucky Derby and they don't win. So I think even though Gervin looks like a very legitimate contender this year, I think it's going to be disappointment again for all the horses that were at the fairgrounds running in the Louisiana Derby. That's the weakest to me.
All right. Question number 3. Ray, who is your sleeper right now?
Battle of Midway, that coming out of the race that you just trashed, the Santa Anita Derby. This horse, it was only his second race around 2 turns. He'd won previously from off the pace in the Santa Anita Derby. He was on the lead, battling every step of the way. Got beat a half length in the end by Gormley. Yes, it was slow, but I think he's going to move forward off that race, and he's going to be the best West Coast representative. And he's my sleeper because I think he could win it.
All right. I disagree, but, that's why he's a sleeper. Mine is going to be Hence, who won the Sunland Derby. I've already mentioned that. He's around 20-1 based on, some people's estimates so far. So he fits the category. Steve Asmussen, the trainer, hasn't had a lot of Derby horses in recent years, but he's done pretty well with the ones that he has had. I remember Nero finishing second back in 2011. And then last year, Gunrunner was a good third and has become a nice older horse. So he can get a horse ready for the Derby. Hence is getting some rest. He had a great race under his belt. I think he's one to pay real close attention to at nice odds.
Okay, question 4. Who is the Enigma? Who's the horse that you just can't quite figure out if they're a contender or a pretender?
I have no idea what to make of Practical Joke, trained by Chad Brown. I have a feeling I want to like him and that I think he is a threat to win the Kentucky Derby because he has the right running style. And I think he's improving. He couldn't get by IRAP the maiden in the Bluegrass, and I don't think he had a ton of excuses either. So there isn't a lot of logic behind me thinking that he's a contender. I just think he might be, but I can't figure him out. So that's my riddle. I don't know about Practical Joke.
All right, well, my Enigma horse is Irish Warcry. He was so impressive winning down in Florida when he beat Classic Empire, who was compromised a little bit that day. He didn't look good before the race, and he totally didn't run his race. And then he gets crushed the next time. But then he goes up to New York in the Wood and wins impressively. I just don't know what to make of this horse. I'm not sure if maybe circumstances led to his victories in the Holy Bull and then in the Wood because the competition was a little suspect. So I'm going to say Irish Warcry, to me, is the Enigma horse of this year's Derby.
His prep, the Wood, actually, from a Beyer speed figure standpoint, came back the strongest of all the preps. I don't know how to exactly explain that. The time wasn't exactly sizzling. It didn't look that fast to the eye. So that's probably a good pick for Enigma. I can't figure him out either. Okay, question number 5. What, in your opinion, is the best storyline heading into the Derby?
Well, as a journalist, I've always kind of looked for not who do I want to win or what's the best story. And to me, this year's best story from an ownership standpoint would be Irish Warcry, the same horse that's an Enigma. He's owned and bred by Mrs. Isabel de Tomaso. Well, he was bred in New Jersey. That's kind of different. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't heard of the name de Tomaso, you've probably heard of Haskell. That's the big race in the summertime, the Grade 1 race for 3-year-olds. She was born into the Haskell family. She's a daughter of Amriel Haskell, who started Monmouth Park. So that's the Jersey connection. But what's really intriguing to me about Mrs. de Tomaso is in the 1950s and 60s, she was a race car driver all over the world. She was driving in South America and Europe and the United States, these road racers that 12-hour endurance races and that sort of thing. She had to be a wild kid doing that kind of stuff. That's where she met her husband. Together, they bought the Maserati Motor Company. The Maserati's a pretty fast car, Scott. I've never had one, but I hear they are. And to me, it's just really kind of a neat story about a woman who's always enjoyed horsepower, whether it's in the form of equine or autos. So to me, that's a great story.
I agree. That is a great story. I got to go with Calumet Farm as being a potentially great story here because Calumet at one time was a powerhouse when it came to the Kentucky Derby. In fact, to this day, they have the most wins as an owner, 8. No one has more than that. But most of those wins, all of them, occurred before 1969. Names like Whirlaway, Citation, Tim Tam. The last one was 1968 Forward Pass, who won on a DQ of Dancer's Image. In recent years, Calumet has not been relevant. This year, they have Hentz, who I've already spoken about. I think highly of him. And they also might have Patch, another horse that could be in the race. So they have a couple of contenders. Brad Kelly, the owner of Calumet, hasn't been seen or heard from since he bought the farm. And this might be the opportunity. Maybe we'll even catch a glimpse of him in the winner's circle if he were to pull it off. I think it would be a story that Kentuckians would rally around, at least around Calumet Farm, if not the owner.
If we had an enigma among people, it would have to be Brad Kelly because I don't think there's been a picture of him in the last 10 years. So it'll be fun.
We'll leave you with a poll on our website that you can weigh in with. Which of the 100-point preps did you think was the best one? Answer at paulickreport.com. Well, that's it for the Kentucky Derby match game and the Friday show. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.